Hey Mike, how are you?
I'm great. How you doing there, Bob?
I'm good. I'm hot. I'm in Florida. It's warm. I'm not used to this, but hey everybody, thanks for being here on the Pop Culture SquadCast. Um, we have a great show for you tonight. We're gonna have Erica Schultz is gonna join us shortly. Um, we're gonna talk about some fun stuff, some fun news. Um, I'm in a different location, so hopefully this is all going well and you're all hearing us well and everything's functioning out there. How was you?
I like
How's it?
I like your mood lighting.
Well, listen, it's I had to find a spot. My
Oh,
mom lives in a place
you're
where
frozen?
there's a lot of things on the
What?
wall,
Some people just can't take a compliment.
and
Totally frozen
you're frozen. You are frozen.
in a very beatific way. I kind of
Yeah,
like that. I
yeah. I'm gonna pull you out and pull you back in, but I. Oh no, you're back. You're cleared. All right. Yeah, it was nice. Hopefully that's the end of our troubles. Um, but yeah, it's yeah, so Bill noticed that I am broadcasting remote. So I want to just clear that up real quick. I am remote. I am staying at my mom's house right now. So I'm in Florida. I have half of my regular setup with me, meaning camera, mic is all the good stuff. We're working on a different internet connection. We're working on a different processor, but otherwise we'll be good.
Let me see if I
All right.
got this right. You have followed your mother down to Florida where she went to get away from you?
No, she left, and I'm just staying here
I see.
because
I like
yeah, I'm house sitting for her and
that.
staying with my sister who needs some care. So
See, my daughter does some house sitting with a cat and a dog.
yeah,
But she
well, there's a
doesn't.
dog here.
Well, but Adrian doesn't go down to Florida. She just goes to Seymour, Connecticut,
Well,
which is
that-
almost as inconvenient as going to Florida.
well, listen, it's very nice weather. So hey, folks, this is one of the weird things, and I was telling Mike earlier. I took my there's a dog here that I need to take care of, so took the dog out for a walk this evening just before we got ready, and one of the neighbors says, "Hey, why don't you look out here through these trees?" And there was a rocket launch. There was a launch from Cape Canaveral that we can see here. My mom's on the west coast of Florida,
Right.
and it was awesome. It went up and way up in the sky, and you could see it passed behind another cloud, came up the other side. It was pretty cool. Then it came back inside, and I looked it up, and it was one of the SpaceX rockets, and I was less impressed.
I understand. Was it manned?
I don't believe so. It was a Falcon 9 rocket that was sending um, satellites up.
Oh, well, then it could blow up if there's no humanity involved. Yeah,
That's
screw the little rat bastard. I'm
yeah.
not. I'm actually kind of taking my gloves off with this whole Washington thing.
Well,
So
I mean, you can. I will let you say whatever you need to say. I have to be a little bit more circumspect in the words that I use uh, because the internet is forever.
the internet is forever. Um, I told that to Mike Grell once. It was back in the late first comics days, and I said that whatever it is, if it's on the internet, it's somewhere, and it'll always be somewhere. Now that's not necessarily true, but we don't know. It may always be somewhere. So, for example, all those like how to build a nuclear bomb things, sites that we saw on the internet back 30 years ago, still there. You want to learn how to build a nuclear weapon? It's right out there for you. So, yes, please be circumspect because you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's fine. Um, let's let's talk about something that happened today, also related to rockets.
Oh, wow. Any segue in the storm?
I am gonna find it. Don't worry. Don't worry. I will find it. The Marvel set us up nicely. They let us know yesterday that there was going to be a teaser trailer this morning. People showed up to start looking at the teaser trailer, and there was a countdown for the teaser trailer to Fantastic Four. If you haven't caught that yet, and there was, I saw it. You saw it. What
I
is
saw it.
what
Well,
is
first of all, it's hard for me to get past that piece of art that you're just showing now, which
art?
is
Art is a very generous word.
art is a very generous word. I appreciate its Chairman Mao origins, and I do have to admit that the one-armed salute is very, very timely these days. But that piece of art sucks.
It
And
does. There was a lot
do
of
believe we have our computers to blame for that.
Well, there was a lot of people who were concerned, and there was a big discussion over the fact that many people feel that it was AI generated. Marvel has explicitly stated that it is not. It is just poor Photoshop, apparently.
Well, that's quite possible. And these days we do refer to stuff that we used to refer to as Photoshopped as AI. And AI is the enemy. So that's really cool. Look at that. Mark's with us. Hi, Mark.
Mark's watching tonight.
Uh-oh. Mark, I need some donuts. Anyway, this is a company that got its start from a mouse. Don't tell me what's real and what isn't real. If you paid somebody to paint that sucker, I think you made a mistake. I was going to say something much more vicious, but then I realized I don't know who it is that they got. Or
well, that's Bill's comment. He said if it's not AI, then crediting the artist is easy to do. So he didn't. He's got a point there.
That's true.
All right. So, questionable poster art aside, what was your impression of the trailer?
Well, it was a teaser trailer.
Yes.
So I shouldn't expect meat and substance. I should expect to be teased. However, it's the teaser trailer of the fourth attempt to make a Fantastic Four movie, fifth attempt. 3 different schools of attemptedness, maybe 4. So a little bit more would have been nice, just to sort of ground us so that we know what their intent is. I don't know that their intent is to do anything different than we'd seen done very, very badly in the previous movies by other people. So I'm trying to be fair here, as is well known amongst those who have ever had to put up with me. I bought FF #1, the first #1, on the newsstand. I can tell you the address. I can tell you what's across the street from it. It was in 1961. And I've read Fantastic Four ever since. I've read it through some bad times, not horrible, but bad times. And through a lot of great times, not just Lee and Kirby, but that's most of it.
Sure.
So I'm really interested, and I really hope that it's cool. I mean, the special effects that you see in these trailers, particularly a teaser trailer, are not the same as what you'll see in the movie release itself.
Sure.
But it's a good start. The first 2 things you got to check out always are the Human Torch and whether he looks cool, which is a funny word to use.
Yeah.
And the Thing, and whether he looks cool, which is a hilarious word to use. I like how the Thing looks. I don't know how he moves. Well, I don't really know. I just see what the poster shot, really. He did a little flying scene of Human Torch that I liked.
Mhm.
You know, they can't do much with Sue in a teaser because she turns invisible. So I don't know. Maybe she was always there. Reed, I question the casting. He's just not a Reed that fits into my Simon and Kirby view of the Fantastic Four. Simon and Kirby, Lee and Kirby view. Sorry.
I that is those are excellent points. Dean noted that he's hopeful. He's looking for the crypto Herbie crossover, which I think everybody wants.
Absolutely.
I thought that the I don't know, the first Sony Fantastic Four movies had a good take on the visuals for Johnny a lot. I really liked the way that they looked.
I agree.
I thought
these were horrible movies. They were just not good. And there's a difference. We live in this world where everything is it's binary. It's either horrible or the greatest thing ever. Oddly, most of Earth fits in between those two posts.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I thought that was the case. I like you am uncertain on how I feel about the casting of Pedro Pascal at this point. I think there was not enough in this teaser for me to be comfortable with it.
Agreed.
Mark says Pedro can act, and if he squints, he can convince himself that the mustache is of the era, and he can let it cook. That's Mark's opinion. Look,
Mark has to deal with the fact that there's no turtles.
I understand. I can say that the teaser trailer gave me enough to be comfortable with the Thing. I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be a really good Thing, to be honest.
I hope so. I'd love to see him in motion.
Well, you know, apparently he can cook.
Yes. And you know, in the real world, that's good enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited enough to be excited about it. You know, we need today, tomorrow, yesterday, in this world, in America, at least most places, we need things to be excited about, and I'm choosing to be excited about it. We're going to bring our guest in right now. So folks, if you're waiting for Erica, we're going to bring her in 2 seconds. I just want to bring back one thought that we had from a previous episode. And I want to tell Mike that Dogman is a hit.
I see.
You
so
see?
I see.
So there you go. That's good news too. We want people to be excited about this, about the stories that are being told in comics. We want people to be excited about comics, and
we want people to be happy. And that sounds like a cliche, but it is so much harder to achieve these days, and it's grown harder and harder. Wait till you see what we talk about at the end of the show.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. In the meantime, though, we have a guest that I'm very excited for. Erica Schultz was on Pop Culture Squadcast a long time ago on our audio cast. This is the first time she's coming on our live Squadcast, so we're very excited for that. And she has become a superstar, and I am so excited to have her here and talk about all the things she's doing. So let's welcome into the show Erica Schultz.
I
Hi.
object to being called a superstar.
You
I am not a
are.
superstar.
You
I am
are.
not a superstar.
You are 100%.
No, I'm 0% superstar.
We will. I beg to differ, and we will discuss later.
Uh-oh.
In
Hi, Erica.
the meantime,
Hi.
hi. Do you guys know each other, Erica and Mike? I don't know if you've met,
I
but I know
believe that we have met at a con or two, just in brief passing. But it is nice to meet you again in person, Mike.
It is wonderful
And
to meet you.
I do hope that you have that Fantastic Four #1 CGC'd and slabbed, and in a very safe space.
No. I had just turned 11 when I bought it.
You still have it?
No. I did sell it though, and I did get some good money for it at the time.
Okay, good.
I'm happy with that. It's one of the dozen reasons why I'm still into comics, and I'm into the comics medium as a storytelling medium.
Yeah.
Because just to tell a story I've told many times on this podcast, I'll do a real short version. My father was trying to shut me up. We were taking a long drive, so he thought he'd buy me a couple of comic books, which he never liked doing because I was obsessed with comics. So we went to a place, nice place. I could only find one comic book, and I even wasn't all that happy about that because I didn't like the monster comics that Atlas was doing.
Was it like a House of Mystery or like
Strange Tales and
yeah.
Tales of Suspense and that stuff.
Yeah.
I wound up loving it within about a year. Kirby did go. How can you go wrong? But he was mad that I could only find one. He literally tossed a dime. Yes, a dime at the drugstore owner, like that, and we went into the car. And I read that book as long as there was daylight, over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So yeah, Fantastic Four means a lot to me in terms of my growth experiences.
Well, I mean, people talk about comics being a gateway to reading for other people, for other reasons. There's a lot of times that kids have difficulty reading, long passages because of a learning disability or just, not feeling engaged by these giant blocks of text. And comics find a way to convey a story, to convey narrative storytelling in what I would consider an accessible way.
Sure.
And so that's why they have, the comics version of all of these classic tales, because you want to get the story. Oh, thank you, Adriana, my baby. I love Adriana. She's the best. You want to get the story, but then you also want to be able to see the interpretation of the story through the artist side. So you're getting two different versions of the same story at the same time. And I think that's just such a really unique way of storytelling, just in general. And I think that's
truly unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we're very lucky to have this, to live in a time when, in some cultures, like in France, especially in Japan and Korea, comics are always part of the culture. Whereas, going through the whole, seduction of the innocents, BS that we had to deal with here. At the same time, though, it is nice to see the fact that there are different ways to embrace comics. There are the very it doesn't always have to be superhero punchy. You've got very romance comics. You have comics that deal with, think historical comics. Think of March, Mouse. These, phenomenal ways of telling the stories in a visual as well as written narrative.
If you wanted to find conservative media, look at comics in the 50s, post Comics Code, even before the Comics Code. But they were under the belief that their audience was of 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
8-year-old boys, because they did the romance comics and the Archies and all that other stuff. But superheroes hadn't been selling, so they didn't have a clue what to do except ultimately bring back the superheroes and do them in a more up-to-date fashion.
Yeah.
We benefit from that, but we also benefit from the fact that the teachers that hated comics so much prior to like 20 years ago, those teachers had to deal with Classics Illustrated because so many of their students were writing their book reports off of Classics Illustrated, and they were just pissed. And if you think about it, I would be too. So from that perspective, Classics Illustrated, and I hate to say this because the guy who still owns it, like owns the rights to it, lives a couple miles from me here, but it saved the business as far as I'm concerned. It allowed us to become acceptable enough to do the risky stuff that goes way beyond and sometimes has nothing to do with the punchy stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with all of that, and it's wonderful. I want to talk a little bit about Erica, and I want to also let you know, while you may not consider yourself a superstar, one of the things that we do on the show is we'll kind of tease who's coming. And every time I told Mike that you were coming on the show, his first great talent was the first thing that came out of his mouth every time he mentioned you were mentioned. And you're a force. You have, if anybody looks at your career and watches the things you've done over the past 15 years,
yeah.
15 years, you set a goal, and no one should ever think that Erica Schultz will not achieve the goals she sets out for herself.
Well, I mean, some people could say that I'm just too dumb to take no for an answer.
Well, that's fine too. But why are comic books? And
therefore,
you're making
I say
comic
good
books.
for you, Bob. We're freezing here.
You're freezing.
Okay.
You don't worry about your face freezing.
To babble because I can hear myself while Bob and Erica look like they're holding their breath. Okay. Yes.
There you go.
You're freezing. But so the question is, why are comic books and you're making comic books so important for you?
I think that comics are a wholly unique medium, and I can't draw as well as I would like to, but I have always wanted to tell stories. And I think that comics are the perfect place for me to tell a story and then see how the artist interprets that story and then retell it when I go back and do my lettering pass.
Okay.
And see how the story evolves from my brain to the page to their page to back, and to then figure out how to make it even better because of the gorgeous art that has come back to say this is what I think. Comics are important to me because, to be honest, it kind of feels like comics are probably the one thing that I'm halfway decent at.
Okay.
Not to be too self-deprecating, but I mean, Bob, you've known me years, that's kind of my brand. But I feel like comics are important, as we were discussing earlier, as a way of communication, as a way of education, as a way of, and I don't mean necessarily education as like it has to be academic, but just as a way of conveying ideas.
Why am I the only one not frozen?
Well, you're the only one that's
we
freezing.
can hear you. We can hear you, but you have like a very good, like, kind of face. So he goes,
Yeah.
Can you hear us? Do you hear us, Mike? Do you hear us stopping?
No. That's why I probably babbled over you because
No, it's fine. You're the one you're freezing a little bit. I'm sorry. It's probably my
I'm
fault.
freezing now.
You're right now frozen.
I'm in Connecticut. Of course, I'm freezing.
Yes. Well,
New Jersey's kind of cold too, and I'm sure Massachusetts is pretty cold too.
Yes, ma'am. You're right.
I am sweating, so don't worry about that. But anyway, so back to that. Yeah, I mean, the education portion of it is important. There's so many things that I've experienced through comics, in my life, whether that I've learned about the world, about learning, about words, about how to express myself, about how other people express themselves.
That was a dramatic pause.
Mike, what is this? Mike's coax is freezing.
Hi, Bill. No, and comics I think is such a really beautiful medium just in general. It's a wonderful medium to also collaborate, and I do enjoy collaboration. I enjoy working with artists who will elevate. You give them a mediocre script, and you give them a piece of coal, and they turn it into a diamond. And I think that is something that makes this such an incredible medium to work in, because
Sure.
you have people to bounce ideas off of. You have people it's not just you. You're not just like when you're writing a novel, which I've never done because too many words. But when you're writing a novel, it's just you in a room, basically. Whereas comics, I know that I'm going to try and convey as best as I can what's in my head, but whatever is up here and whatever's on that page is going to be blown out of existence when the artist sees it and puts their 2 cents in, and just, again, it's all about elevating everything. And I've said this a bajillion times and people are so sick of hearing me say it, but writing comics and creating comics is like making a triple decker sandwich. You've got to have like a good script with a good editor who's going to make the story better, to then another good draft, to a good artist, to a good colorist, to a good letterer. Put it all together in a nice package and take one big bite, and just everything is like in harmony with itself.
The beauty of that process is that no two teams, people working on any one given project, operate the same way.
Exactly.
It's a cool that, and I'm oddly enough certainly do. Figure out what is it there that will get this thing moving better, not faster necessarily, better, getting that story across the plate in the most meaningful way you can.
Exactly.
Sometimes the letterer can change the whole feeling of the page.
Yeah.
There's no non-substantial role in the process, in the collaborative process of doing comics. If you're doing it all by yourself, cool. Doesn't mean you're getting along with yourself, but that's still cool. That's great. It's
Dean can chime in on that one.
Well, I mean, I tend to letter a lot of my own work. So when I'm lettering, I tend to do a lot of rewriting. And as I'm lettering, I'm going back and seeing, what I was thinking when I wrote this scene was A, but the artist took it and made it B. So let me make sure that whatever I'm writing and the design of the balloons and the flow of the narrative complements what they've put together. And when you were saying that there's no two collaborators that will work together the same way. You're absolutely right. I mean, when I was teaching at the Kubert School, my second year students, what I would do is I would write a very short script, 3-4 pages. Now I'd give it to the students, and they all had the same 3-4 pages, and they had to illustrate it. They all had the exact same script, and every single one of them chose different angles, chose different, not just angles, but different expressions on faces and things like that. It's all the same words on the page, but all these different artists interpreted things differently. And I think that's something that's just so interesting, because it tells you a lot about the artist, and it also tells you a lot about the medium in general and how people see, the medium and interpret the medium. And yeah, I just think it's a very interesting way of looking at, how it's almost like a Rorschach test. You hand somebody a script and you see the way they draw it, and that sort of gives you a little bit of an insight into them, who they are, etc. So I just think it's just a really cool thing, and I love the medium. I love comics, and and it's something that I'm very, very lucky to be a part of.
Because you wanted to be, because you asserted yourself into it.
Yes, I had a job at an ad agency for many years. I was an art director at an ad agency, and I worked my way from the brand new, my creative director used to joke and say I had the new grad smell, because I had just graduated college, and I started working there 2-3 months after I graduated college. And I worked my way from being an assistant after 2 years to being an art director. And I did storyboards, I did print ads, I did television commercials, the whole thing. And it was fun, and it was interesting, and it was collaborative. But when I got laid off in 2008, like everybody did, I kind of had a moment where I said, what is it that I really want to do, and what is it, and how can I get to that? And I had been friends with Marilyn Adams, the late Neil Adams' wife, and she, they had started doing a project which ended up being the Astonishing X-Men motion comic. And so, I had spoken to her, and she's like, hey, how are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, honestly, Mare, I need a job. And so she's like, all right, well, we need Photoshop artists and stuff to work on this. And she brought me in, and I was supposed to be there from December to April. And I was there for 7.5 years. Instead of like 4 months, I was there 7.5 years. And I learned a lot in that studio, just in general. I learned basically about the process of making comics. And even though I'd always loved comics, and I had loved I had always loved the final product. I would be the person who goes in the store and you see it on the shelf and you pull it off, but you have absolutely no idea what it took to actually create it, to make it. And so once I got to see behind the scenes, and not just the amount of work, skill, talent, luck, everything that it takes to make a comic, I really started appreciating what was on the shelves a lot more. But I also kind of felt, this is something that I think I can do. I mean, I've never really shied away from a challenge, be it good or bad. So I figured, this is something that I think that I can do. Let me give it a shot. And I, spoke to one of the artists in the studio, a man named Vicente Alcazar, and I said, look, I wrote this script, and I want you to read it, and if you like it, maybe we'll do it. And he took a couple of days and he read the script, and he's like, yeah, I like this, let's do it. And that was the first comic that we ever came up with, which was M3. she saw how the sausage was made. Wait, it says she saw how the sausage was made and didn't flinch. I don't know if I didn't flinch, Bill. I did flinch some. I did flinch some.
So that was M3, right?
That was M3, yeah. And we put it out there, and it was a hell of a time, but we got it done. And I remember we had first, I think the first 2 issues out, and I remember being at this like charity convention, because it was the only convention that we could be at table. And I was at this charity convention, and one of my friends from college came to see me. And, you know, and she bought the 2 issues of the book, even though she never reads comics anyway. And she said to me, you know, even if you never do anything else for the rest of your life, you did this. Like, you did it. Yeah. Nobody can take these 2, you know, 24-page books. Nobody can take that away from you.
It's amazing.
And I was like, no, you're right. And so there's a part of me that thought, like, do I want to keep doing this? And I said, yeah, why not? You know, I felt as if there was a compulsion to tell stories. And that's something that I've always kind of felt since I was young. There's this compulsion to tell stories, to have some type of narrative. And it was just a matter of like finding my medium. And I think I found it. So, you be the judge.
Listen, you have found your medium. There is a comment, and I'm very excited about this comment. Number one, it means that this person's watching the show, which makes me excited. But he has a question for you. Yeah. So Joe wants to know, who is Erica's favorite person in comics, and why is it him?
Wait, Joe Mulvey. Oh, it's okay. So Joe Mulvey is one of my favorite people in comics.
I love Joe Mulvey.
Joe Mulvey is fantastic. Hold on one second. I just noticed that as I'm sitting here weaving, my kitten bit one of the strings in half.
That's terrible.
So, no, it's not terrible. It's just it'll come out in the litter. I'm just trying to make sure she doesn't swallow the 6-inch piece of embroidery fluff that she just ate. Marble, come here. All right. Well, you know, let's hope you have insurance for a reason. So Joe Mulvey is one of my favorite people in comics. Joe is fantastic. Joe is a great talent, also an absolute sweetheart. And if Joe is one of those people where if he's in your corner, then we have life problems. Exactly. If Joe is in your corner, then you're golden.
Yep.
You can do anything and Joe has your back. And that's I think is very important. But yeah, I mean, I would say one of my other favorite people in comics is Gail Simone. I adore Gail. Gail, who got me involved in Swords of Sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And she has always been a big cheerleader. Another person I love in comics is Bill Sienkiewicz. Bill actually did the cover for the 2nd issue of M3, and he has always been a huge supporter. Even when I was nobody, he was a huge supporter, and I will forever adore Bill. I mean, aside from being one of the most talented creators in the history of the medium, he's just an absolute adorably wonderful person, and I love you, Bill.
I did take the collected edition to Forgotten Home instead of the issue 1.
Because and Bill also, so Bill did the cover for M3 number 2. Bill did the cover for Forgotten Home. Bill did the cover for the trade paperback for 12 Devils Dancing. Mm. So Bill is my go-to cover man. And yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky to have his ear, because he knows the business and he's been in the business for a while, and he is just a genuinely sincere person. And
yes,
And
He is
I just love that.
one of the finest people in
Yes,
our business. A good sense of humor,
100%.
and his talent is 50 times bigger than his great sense of humor.
Yes.
He's always been there for young talent, as far as I can see. I mean, he moved out to the coast, but I respect and admire Bill enormously. Gail as well, going back to her days on The Simpsons. So,
Yeah, Boom. That was not Boom Comics. Who did The
Bongo.
Simpsons? Bongo. Thank you.
it
It was
was,
a EO something.
but she did the newspaper strip, which
Yeah.
ultimately got dropped because it was too much like The Simpsons, and Bongo packaged that too, and I think she wrote like the first half of all of those Sundays, and they were brilliant. You look at those things, and well, the first thing I said when I read the first two or three was, "Who wrote this?"
Yeah.
And then I was told,
I'm a hairdresser in Oregon.
yeah, and somebody said Gail, and I went, "Who?" Well, that was the last time I ever had to say who.
Yeah. Some redhead in Oregon wrote all these.
Right.
Exactly. I want to talk a little bit about the things you're working on now
Okay.
because they're very interesting. I want to talk about your relationship currently with Electro Nachos. Like, how did that come about, and how is that working for you? I mean, I'm gonna before I just want to give a little backstory. So, like, I was reading Daredevil and the turn when Elektra took over the mask for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Has now
She hasn't given it
enjoyed
back.
it. What?
She hasn't given it back.
Right. So, and you have now taken that mantle or chariot, and you're not coming back with it. So what's that like right now for you?
Electra is a lot of fun to write. I think I've made her snarkier than she has been in the past.
Well, I do love
And
that.
my reasoning for that is basically because she's just over Matt's BS. Like, she's really just, he went to hell, he came back, he wanted to be a priest, he wanted his space, she gave him his space, everything was cool. And then, they did the whole king and queen of the fist. And then, he decides does he want to be Daredevil? He doesn't want to be Daredevil. It's this whole back and forth. So she's sick, basically, of not asking for permission to be Daredevil, but she's just sick of, like, babying him. And,
sounds like somebody else who knows what they want and goes and gets it.
Maybe a little. So she basically just doesn't want to deal with his nonsense anymore. He said, if you want to be Daredevil, you can't kill. She's keeping to that.
Mm-hmm.
But she doesn't have to hand him back the helmet and the horns, and she's going to do her thing. The world, New York City is obviously big enough for many, many, many different heroes. It'll be big enough for a second Daredevil.
Well, if they can deal with like 400 Spider-Men, they can deal with 2 Daredevils.
Yeah, I mean, you've got two. Well, you've got Spider-Man, Spider-Boy, Spider-Gwen, or Ghost Spider. You've got how many Moon Knights now? You've got
a lot of Moon Knights.
People. You got plenty of people. Well, you've got Moon Knight, you've got Hunter's Moon. You got plenty of people in New York. New York is big enough for everybody.
So, along the lines of Elektra, I want to tell you that issue 2 of Wolverine was the best book I read that week by far, and definitely even higher than that, but absolutely minimum that. It was so much fun. It was perfect. Laura Kinney is one of my favorite characters. I never expected that to be the case. She has been for a while now, but I am absolutely loving what you're doing with her. You have captured her perfectly as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. The way I look at Elektra and Laura's relationship is, if 48-year-old me was having a conversation with 22-year-old me,
Interesting.
and if I could go back and have a conversation with myself and say, look, I've been there. I know exactly what you're going through. And my younger self would be like, you don't understand, blah, blah, blah. You know, the typical thing. I mean, we're framing it in the sense that, like, Laura is very pro-mutant and there's a lot of anti-mutant stuff going on. So Laura is very quick to say, you know, to Elektra, you don't understand, or to say to Luke Cage, you don't understand because you're not a mutant. But Laura is young and she doesn't have all the answers, even though she thinks she does. And I think that the fact that Elektra, of all people, gets to sort of be the funny guy while Laura has to be the straight man, I think is an interesting role reversal for Elektra, but also something that we've sort of eased into. It's not like we just automatically gave Elektra this, you know, goofy personality.
No.
If you go back to when Sergio Davia and I worked on Elektra with Gang War, that idea of Elektra having, you know, being a little snarky and, you know, telling off Peter, that's something that, making sure I didn't drop a stitch, that's something that we've sort of built toward between, you know, Gang War with Sergio and Woman Without Fear with Mike Dowling, and now Unleash Hell, and her, you know, cameo, or I guess 2 issues with Laura. And I think that it's interesting to see their dynamic because they do have very, very similar backgrounds. They were both trained as assassins. They're both women who have been underestimated. And they're both women who've been basically led along by men in one way or another. And so Elektra wants to do what I think any older sibling or mentor type person would want to do, is you want to ameliorate, I don't even know if that's the right word, any possible pain that you anticipate your charge is going to hit. You want to make sure that they avoid that. You want to tell them, go left instead of right, because if you go right, it's going to hurt. And I'm trying to save you from getting hurt, even though staring you dead in the face, they're going to go right.
Yeah.
And then instead of saying, well, you didn't listen to me, they are saying, okay, you didn't listen to me, so let's try this again. And I think we softened Elektra. And when I say we've softened Elektra, I don't want people to say, you know, oh, Elektra used to be such a bad assassin, you know, this is badass woman, and now she's like, whatever. No. Elektra is absolutely still, I would argue, the most dangerous person in the Marvel Universe. But she softened a little with Alice because she had this 16-year-old charge. And she even makes a comment to Laura, like, oh, what is it with teenagers thinking they know everything? But yeah, I really like the dynamic between the two of them. When I was speaking to the editorial team about writing Laura, I made a joke about how I was just going to start pulling in all the characters that I'm writing on other things just to sort of like lessen my workload.
Yeah.
And that was originally kind of one of the reasons why I brought Elektra in the first place, was this idea of like, well, I'm writing Elektra and I've got her chatting in my head and I got to, you know, compete with Laura. But if I need to give Laura somebody to bounce off on, I already have Elektra in my head. So why not just, you know, see what happens?
And it makes sense. What
Yeah.
you've done with Elektra with respect to Matt Murdock's inner circle, I think is quite formidable. Nobody in Matt Murdock's circle can be defined as anything other than part of or a reaction to Matt Murdock's continuous
Guilt.
internalized course,
Yeah.
which is getting old. But I also got Daredevil #1 off the stands, so I am old. But to define Elektra, we've seen bits and pieces, but usually it just adds to that stereotype. The ninja warrior, confused about her role with Matt, stereotype, and you've taken it beyond that. You've given her more of a life.
I don't think you said you softened her. I don't think you've softened her. I think you've given her more texture. I think that's a fair assessment.
I want to build her out a little more. I mean, you have Daredevil #1. I have 181. I splurged and got myself a copy of 181 not too long ago and put it on my wall. I think that, like you were saying, everyone in Matt's orbit is more or less acting and reacting to Matt's circumstances versus their own situation. And I think that it started when Marco Cicchetto and Chip Zdarsky brought Elektra in as Daredevil when Matt was going to jail. I think that they sort of laid the foundation for Elektra being her own woman and very much separate to Matt. And I'm just sort of building on that and just adding a little here and there,
Absolutely.
A lot of women characters who were introduced in the late 60s and 70s, throughout the 70s, were strong characters because the publisher said so. They didn't quite know how to do a strong woman character, having had a little experience at that personally themselves. So the great thing about getting a lot of women involved in comics is a lot of women are saying, like, that just isn't quite right. Let's make this a little bit more right. This is it's not all women think this way or act this way. Nothing to do with that. It's a perspective matter, sure, but it's an individualistic perspective. And anytime you put meat on that concept, as some people have done with Sue Storm, I guess Storm has always been in that category, but Elektra needed fleshing out as a human.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot to help that.
I agree. It's funny because you brought this up in how you react between Elektra and Laura, but I had a question here, and the question was, is there a lesson about being a comic writer that you wish you had learned earlier? So if you could go back and tell yourself.
Well, I mean, see, this is the interesting thing. I didn't start writing comics until I was 31, 32.
Sure.
If I could go back, I would tell myself, do the Marvel and DC internships and get into comics quicker. You really, please just don't get sick and throw up a piece of purple thread. If I could go back, I would tell myself that working at Marvel or working at a major publisher is not the inn that you think it is. Like, my first professional job with a company was at Marvel, and it was in 2014. And I thought, oh my God, I've made it. And I didn't hear from Marvel again until 2018.
Right.
And then I didn't hear from Marvel again after I did Daredevil. I did a story with Matt and Misty Knight, and I did that in 2018. And then I didn't hear from Marvel again until Bob, I believe you told me about the Moon Knight anthology.
Right. Which I was going to get to that because
And
the
then,
last time we talked, that hadn't happened.
yeah, and I had I love Mark Spector as a character. I think he's phenomenal, and I said, you know what? Well, I'm going to shoot my shot, and I sent an email to an editor who I knew was likely not going to be the editor on the anthology, but I knew that she was receptive enough to give me point me in the right direction. And when she said, "Oh, Brevoort's doing that," I was like, "Oh God," Not that there's anything wrong with Tom. It's just everybody's afraid of him. I will happily admit, I'm afraid of Tom. And I reached out and I said, I'd really like to be part of this, and I got the typical, well, we've got more people applying than we have spots, so what do you got, kid, kind of thing. That obviously was not his words, but that was how I read the sentiment. And because I love Moon Knight, I had, half a dozen things already put out. So I just, very, very eagerly sent him some ideas. And one of the things that I love about Moon Knight is my dad in the early 80s used to drive a cab in New York City. So Jake has always been like my favorite out of Moon Knight's personalities, even though Mark Spector Moon Knight is probably by Sal Voluto and Chuck Dixon is probably one of my favorite Moon Knight runs ever. I have all the way up to Stained Glass Scarlet in originals. And I really just thought, you know what, if I'm going to do this, if I'm really going to commit, if I'm going to not just be like an editor and do like a little writing projects here, there, and everything, if I'm really going to say, I want to be a writer and I'm going to focus on writing 99.9% of the time, why not just do it? Go for it. And I did. And that opened up a lot of more doors, because since that Moon Knight, which that issue that my story with David Lopez, and it was David Lopez and myself, Gail, and was it Dale Eaglesham? No, sorry, it was Ann Nesenti and Stefano Raffaele was in that. That issue got nominated for an Eisner. And since then, I've been very lucky to be able to have more of I won't say an open door policy, but to have more of an ear to be able to say, I'd like to pitch this, or I'd like to work with these characters. And by no means is it any guarantee, but the fact that I don't know whether it was ambition, initiative, assertiveness, whatever, because I know sometimes those words tend to be bad words when it comes to how women act in ways, but that sort of, I'm going to shoot my shot and see what happens. That attitude is what helped. And I know that that's not easy.
No.
I absolutely, I know it's not easy. I know not everybody can just say, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to do it. I know not everybody has the ability to do that. And trust me, there are days that I question every decision I've made from 1977 to today. And
starting with birth.
Yeah. Day I came home from the hospital, I thought, oh God, what have I gotten myself into?
Smart.
But this idea of, just going for it, you have to. And even if you don't make it, even if it doesn't go your way, and to be perfectly honest, this is not still making it, because at any given time, I can run my contract out and they'll say, thank you very much, it was nice working with you. And the only thing that I have is to then say, well, I wrote all of this stuff for Marvel. Maybe company B will hire me for something,
The things to
So,
remember about comics, if I had the ability, as Bob had said, to go back in time and confront your younger self and your peers.
good luck.
Yeah, I'm hip. The whole idea doesn't even sound that good. But if I had that, I would say to all of you, comics is exactly like show business.
Yeah.
For every, and Bob's heard this way too many times, for every great, Jack Kirby out there, there's 100 people who are just as good sitting in their home drawing boards who never take that step, get that step, or are able to follow in those steps. Same thing is true with rock and roll. For every great guitar player, there's a million that never get out of the garage.
Yeah.
Every form of the arts, it takes perseverance. And since it's a solo experience, we're sequentially collaborative. So it's, room somewhere doing what we do, it's impossible to get that type of perspective to appreciate the fact that we are in a medium where you're always going to have to be a little bit on the make. Luckily, we in this business still are pretty damn affable. You don't get the backstabbing you see in most of the other forms.
I would.
It's not always beautiful.
I would disagree.
It's
I
a
would
lot
say
better.
I would disagree as well.
There is a lot of what I would consider, high school politics.
A lot more than I think that. I think what we see is a lot more than what Mike saw when he was working, on staff at DC and stuff. I think the high school politics has grown.
Well, yeah.
It's gotten bigger.
To be honest, I find that just completely ridiculous, and I'll tell you why. Because we're the outcasts, for lack of a better term. We are the outcasts from high school. We were the kids who got made fun of for watching, Next Generation and, trying to talk to your friends in the fourth grade the next day after the second episode, which was basically Naked Time. They're basically just redoing Naked Time and finding it so hilarious, the interactions between Data and Tasha Yar. And this may or may not be an autobiographical situation, but I digress. And just having your classmates look at you like you have four hats.
Sure.
Or why? What are you talking about? Like, why are you watching Star Trek? Like, what is that all about? And so we're supposed to be, in my mind, and this is, I won't say naivete or. I guess this is my way of saying in a perfect world, because we had more or less, I won't say bullying, but we were more or less on the fringe.
Oh yeah.
We would then be bound to each other for this. But unfortunately, a lot of times people will take that crabs in the barrel kind of thing of, oh, well, you've ascended past me, therefore I have to step on you. And, and I'm not going to say that I didn't fall prey to it when I first started. I won't mention names, but there was somebody who I was close to in the beginning of my career that my frustration with where my career was going ended up really killing a friendship, because it wasn't a matter of like envy or anything like that. It was just a matter of, I was so hell-bent on hoping that my career was going to go one direction, and when it wasn't, I was insufferable to be around. And I absolutely admit to that. At the same time, though, there is a part of it where now that comics are linked to what people perceive as big, big, big money, and for some people, for a very, very, very slim few,
It is.
it is big, big, big money. But
Fewer today than yesterday.
Comparing it to acting, like you were saying, like how many actors are working actors? They pay their bills, but they don't live. They're not, making $5 million, $10 million, $50 million a movie. Excuse me. Ooh, sorry, I burped. My apologies.
But if we don't have them, we don't have enough, right? Just like, and it, unfortunately, if we don't have, we don't live in an egalitarian society, unfortunately. So there are going to the reality is that there are superstars who make more. Not that you're not a superstar, it's just superstars that make more. You're not getting over it. And but here's, I want to just kind of follow up on what you were saying was like, part of being part of this community, a member, frequenter of this donut shop, as Mike likes to say, is that we're the nerds. Like I was traveling last week and I was reading a comic and I texted one of the creators and said I really enjoyed what you did here with this thing, and I said, yes, I am that nerd who's sitting in an airport reading comics, and he replied, of course, that's the right way to do it. One of the things that we've done that is better today than when we were kids is that it's a little bit more. I hope it's a little bit more acceptable. Like I don't care, I'll do it. It doesn't matter. I'm not. There's no. Hopefully, there's less shame.
Reading comics in public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was a kid.
Done that just to be a freak. I would read comics on the Chicago L trains constantly. Then I started working for DC, and we'd get these make readies, these the early copies, unbound, uncut, untrimmed. And Dick Giordano and I would get on the commuter train and come up to Connecticut, each with our own stack of make readies. We'd be trading comics back and forth. Hey, did you read this? Look at this. And all these other people in their suits and with their umbrellas thought that we were idiots.
I remember being looked at funny for reading a Wizard World magazine, on the E train going to work when I was working in Manhattan. Yeah,
that's what makes you a comics pro, is being able to sit there, read your comics, and deal with the fact that some people think, therefore, you're a moron. Far less today than before. But with all the movies and television shows and stuff, that's understandable, I guess. But it's also the fact that comics have been around for 4 generations now.
Yeah.
All those librarians that would throw me out of their library at school today are loving comics, not because, at least we're getting kids to read, which is true, but a very defeatist position. But because they grew up reading comics, or their brothers, sisters did. So they have familiarity with it, and they know it's not evil. It's a storytelling device.
Yes. One of my very close friends is a librarian for a school in the UK, and Fee would always say to me, like, comics. I get these kids that are coming into the library, on their lunch or their study hall or whatever, and they're coming up to me and asking me, like, I like this movie or I like this TV show. Is there a comic that's like that? And the joy that she gets from hearing that.
Yeah.
And it's not just superhero comics. She's pointing them into the direction of all kinds of books. But that, for her, that's so important because there's an enthusiasm behind it. I think that there are some people that are in comics. I'm just going to say it. I think there are some people that are in comics for the wrong reasons. I think that
Sure.
you should be in this business because you love it. Obviously, there are certain pay disparities that need to be worked out. But I think that you should be in this business because you love the medium. I feel that as of late, there are a lot of people who are just saying, oh, well, I'm going to, make a graphic novel because I really want to sell this TV show. I really want to sell
Right.
this movie. So I'm going to make a graphic novel, kind of half-ass it, and then turn around and be like, in my producer meeting, say, hey, here's my graphic novel. Let's make it into a movie. This is the storyboard already. If that idea has sadly proliferated, but I think there are still enough people that are in comics because they love the medium of comics, versus I'm in comics because I want to make a movie or I want to make a TV show, or I see comics as a consolation prize if I couldn't make it as a screenwriter or something like that.
Right.
And I'm the first person to admit there are, and I was having a conversation with Bill Sienkiewicz about this a few years ago when he would say, like, when people asked him what he did, he told them he was a baker because he was worried about telling them that he was, a comic book artist. When people say, what do you do? I say, I'm a writer. And sometimes that's as far as it goes. Other times they'll say, oh, what do you write? And I have to sort of know my audience. If I'm at a cocktail party and people are, wearing clothes a hell of a lot more expensive than what I could afford, I'll say I'm a fiction writer. Because the second I say I'm a comic book writer, they'll say, oh, so you're not a real writer, that kind of thing. Because if you're a screenwriter, if you're a filmmaker, then obviously you're a real writer. But a comic book writer, they still make comic books? Yeah, dummy, they still make comic books.
Yeah, have you been to movies lately?
We've been making cartoons and comics since before we were making books.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go to Lascaux. You want that is Lascaux is literally a comic on a wall in France.
Right.
Yep.
Right. If somebody doesn't like the fact that I'm in comics, I've been in a lot of other things. So there's a lot of stuff for me to talk about. Screw them. I don't care. Cultural bigotry is not as debilitating as actual bigotry, but it's there and it's not far away. It really isn't. What are you, a moron? Well, you could use that in any context. Talking about anything, as long as you want to maintain yourself as being in a superior position. Screw that shit.
I will usually tell people that I'm a fiction writer. And although if people say, oh, you're not a real writer, then I'll throw out, well, I was commissioned by Paramount to write a movie. And I did. And unfortunately, the movie got scrapped. But I wrote a movie for Paramount.
There you go.
So there you go.
That makes
that
listen. Here's the thing. As your friend told you, you are a writer because you made those first two books. Doesn't matter. Whatever you've done, you've done it. I know we don't have a whole much more time with you. I wanted to turn back because one of the, when I had you on last time, we talked in a professional setting
4 years ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Years ago.
I think it was 2020, to be honest with you. I think it was.
Probably, yeah.
Because it was Mandrake was coming out.
Yes.
I would like to say words about that when you're done.
Okay. Well, one of the things. So when that Moon Knight book came out and you were in it,
yes,
I don't think I've ever been happier for a creator than I was to know that you were able to to write a Moon Knight story and get it published. I cannot tell. So, because I know how much you love that character, and we've talked about it a bunch of times. What was that like for you to be able to do that? And you've done other Moon Knight stuff since that first one. So how was that for you?
It was thrilling. The fact that it was, sure, you can do this, and just tweak this and tweak that. I thought to myself, I have to be dreaming, because there's no way in hell that my pitch was accepted with just a couple of tiny little tweaks. It was thrilling because I got to use Jake, and it was incredible that I got to work with David Lopez, who is just stunning artist. So it was honestly it was really, but then there was a moment where my brain was like, don't get too excited, because if you get too excited, what's going to happen is the same thing that happened when you had Daredevil in 2018. They're not going to call you for another 4 years. So don't get too excited. So I had to temper my expectations. But I mean, it did open a lot of doors, and I did get to write Moon Knight again. I got to write a What If, where Edgar Salazar and I introduced a new character named Luminary, and that was a lot of fun. And I gave, because that is a riff, that's a What If directly coming off of Mark Spector Moon Knight #3 from 1989. I gave a copy to Sal Valuto, who I met at DragonCon in 2023. And I had him sign my original copy of issue #3 that he signed, and then I gave him a copy of the new issue, and he said I loved it, and he asked me, why is it that I and Edgar chose to go to his run in Moon Knight? And I said, because Mark Spector Moon Knight doesn't have Marlene as this shrinking violet. She has agency. She trains with Mark. She's her own woman. There's a scene in, I want to say issue number 1, because at the end of issue 1, Bushman gets her. There's an issue where Mark opens the car door and there's a gun on the passenger side, and he's like, you want to move the heater so I can sit down? And she's like, oh yeah. She has agency. She has spunk. She has sass. She has one of probably the greatest panels in comic book history in issue #3, where she is in a green bikini and she's holding an AK. And that is the sexiest shot you will ever see. I don't care. It is the sexiest thing you will ever see. And I have been on the hunt for that original page. I will sell a kidney for that page.
Who has it? You don't know?
I have no idea where it is. There's a guy who, he's a little weird, let's be honest. He's a little weird, but he's a big fan of mine. And every time I'm doing a signing at this one shop in Jersey, he always comes by. And he has taken it upon himself to find that page. I will obviously pay for it, but he has taken it upon himself. And he has called Anthony. He has called a bunch of people asking, flip. Can you flip?
No, it's just the cover.
Okay.
But this is the book. This is the book that Erica.
That is the book, and I have my copy that I just pulled off the wall that is signed by Sal Valuto.
Nice.
This is my copy signed by Sal Valuto.
That's great.
And then and so when we were redoing, because the original What Ifs were these, like, you would replay the first couple of pages of the original and then you would have the twist.
Mm-hmm.
And in part of the first couple of pages, you had Marlene in the bikini. And I was taking swipes from that and putting it in the script to make sure that we were going as close to shot for shot. And I got into an argument with my editor about bikini because
Really?
in our book, she's in a tank top and cutoff shorts.
Oh,
And I got into a huge argument with the editor. He was saying, we can't do this. The people will, like, there will be riots. And I was like, who cares? Let's do it. And he's like, no, blah, 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 blah. And I remember him saying, they'll crucify us. And I said, I'll jump on the cross. Because I wanted it that badly. He's like, no. And I was like, look, the woman in this project is saying we need to do this. This isn't a sexist thing. Like, I'm telling you right now. And he was like, no. And he pulled rank and said no. So she's in cutoff and shorts. But I will open this up and I will show you the image that I'm talking about, because this is how much I feel about this image. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm pulling it out of my cheap Walmart frame.
that's okay.
Okay.
I'm impressed.
What, did I have it?
No, that you're willing to do this.
This is when I show you this.
That's a really nice
you're gonna know
copy.
why. Yeah, I know. It was. I would say that if I had it graded, it's probably like an 8.5, give or
At
take.
least it looks good. I mean, I can't see
Yeah.
any defect, but the paper, I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I paid probably, I want to say 50, maybe give or take. Okay, this is the shot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And we just went from PG to PG-13. Thank you very much.
Is that not the sexiest thing you've ever
Of course
seen in
it
your
is.
life?
Of course. You're not wrong.
So I
Depends
fought
where
so
you
hard
are.
for that.
If I saw that on the subway, it wouldn't look so sexy.
But it was such an iconic moment in this
Sure.
book, because she is held captive in Burundi, and yet she is able to get out of her captive hands, get an AK, and the words out of her, because he's marked punching Bushman saying, "Where's Marlene? Where's Marlene?" And she says, "I'm right here, lover," with a giant gun in a bikini. And you're like, damn,
Now,
that is a strong female character right
There
there.
you go.
did you read that when you were 12?
No, I didn't actually get into Moon Knight until about college. So once I had gotten, well, you know who I'm cosplaying as next time I see Erica at a con. Go for it. I want to see you in that bikini, in the blue-green bikini with the AK. Go for it. I started reading Moon Knight in college, and then I was trying to go back and getting, and then, you know, with Marvel Unlimited, it's great because you can read everything.
Right.
But I mean, I have like Butcher's Moon, like the big fat compendiums, the essentials, Butcher's Moon, all that stuff. And I've read as much of it as I can through that. And then I've read, and like I said, I have Mark Spector Moon Knight. I think it's 1 up to 15. It's just before Stained Glass Scarlet starts, that arc starts. And if I had, you know, terrific money, I would search the globe for every single copy of, you know, every single issue of this book. And I would have all of them. But right now I've got, you know, the ones that I cherish, which is the Sal Voluta ones. And I think he's such an interesting character. I think that he's been done really well, and I think that he's been done really badly.
Sure.
But I think that he's such an interesting character, and he has the ability to, like all of these characters, they have the ability to evolve. And I know that that's a problem with some fans. Some fans really want the character to always be the same. But I think that part of our job as creators is to do something new, do something different, not necessarily homage what's come before us, but pay it tribute, and then move to another square on the board. You know?
Yeah, as long as your homage doesn't still gets the story across to the people who aren't aware of the homage part, you're doing great. You know, that's how it should be.
Yeah, it's an important balance that somebody needs to do, and it's. I mean, I do have one question, but I know I don't want to keep you too long. Mike had a point about Mandrake because we didn't have a chance to talk about that. So,
yeah, Mandrake, yeah.
Could you put that up? The cover,
the Mandrake cover.
Yeah,
I can get it.
Okay.
Oh, that's Amelia Vidal, and they're actually one of the character designers for Marvel Animation.
Mm-hmm.
So they did the character designs for the X-Men '97 series. They did the character designs for the Marvel What If animated series. So yeah, Amelia's fantastic.
Well, that cover is great, but that's not why I'm pointing to it. I worked with Lee Falk towards the end of his life.
Oh wow!
On the Phantom comic book. Oh yeah, I was. Now you see, I was always into newspaper strips. I learned how to read off of the newspaper strips, so I've always been into that. Mandrake doesn't date well.
Yeah.
And the artwork sometimes is a little flaky, but the concept was incredibly popular. So what is it about that concept that was so popular and so vital, even in the 1950s, which is like over 30 years after it was created? Well, all that stuff, magicians don't dress and look like David Niven anymore. And even though Lee Falk would dress this way, it was still a little weird to see a person in a top hat and an opera cape. But Lee did dress that way. So when
I'm still waiting for Steranko to show up at a con with the top hat.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm still waiting for Steranko to show up at a con with the top hat. Jim Steranko.
So when I saw your project out there, I was thinking, okay, somebody's making another attempt to make the King characters contemporary. A worthy goal, very difficult to do. They are so dated in concept, no matter how vital they were at the time, and how wonderful it is to go back and read that stuff from that context. How do you do it for the 21st century? So I was really interested in seeing your Mandrake. First of all, the cover was great, and then it's like, oh, let's check this out. And I walked away a fan of yours. You took the character and everything that was important about that character. It's like what they did with James Bond and with Doctor Who. These are the things that worked. These are the elements that are critical. Let's see what we can do with that as we're trying to make believe we have a calendar that was printed this year. And you did just that. The whole, gender switch, fine. That's not original. Sometimes it's needed. This time it was fascinating.
Well, making her younger. Thank you. And it was like you said, some of the old strips are really offensive, for lack of a better term. And
yes.
So going back and reading the old strips and just trying to, I was basically trying to strip everything down to the skeleton. What is there? What is in the bones there? And this idea of illusion, and not just the illusion of, creating magic to solve crimes or anything, but there's an illusion that Mandrake himself is sort of telling himself, and this whole thing with him and Princess Narda, and this sort of will they, won't they back and forth. And I liked that idea. And then when King Features came to me and we had a whole conversation, they said, we want to refresh it. We want it to be, and I don't know if they were thinking about doing Defenders at the time, but they were saying, we want to refresh it. We want to make it for a new audience, and we want to possibly make Mandrake a young woman. And I said, all right, well, right there, you can turn around and take that idea of these illusions that you're creating, but also that you are telling yourself. I mean, that's something high school girls do all the time,
Right.
100%. So that fits in with it, and the fact that Mandy has this, these issues in high school in general, and dealing with the mean kids and blah 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 blah, but then also having to deal with her mother, who is extremely secretive. Her mother doesn't want to give her all the information because she's afraid that if she knows the truth, then what's that going to do? Kids can't be trusted with all the information sometimes. Kids sometimes go off on their own, and like we were talking about before, trying to protect them from the hurt that they're going to cause others as well as themselves. And I think that was kind of an interesting way to look at it. And I worked with T at King Features, and they were phenomenal. The team, Diego and Mateus and everybody over at Stonebot, they were great. The crew over at Rec 5, who was doing the distribution and stuff, they were great. They had asked about doing a follow-up. I pitched them a follow-up. Never heard anything, so I don't know. I'd love to go back to her. I'd love to have Amelia come back and do covers again.
If you wind up doing that sequel, please drop me a note. I want to know about that. That was such
Absolutely.
a great job. Now, I'm not saying that the rest of your stuff doesn't live up to
everything else is crap. No.
Yeah, everything else is crap. But that was a hell of a challenge, and lots of people in many media take on that update challenge all the time.
Yeah, well, that's the new thing now. Is because they want to take something that is, something that's IP that they already have the access to. So.
Yeah, and also it's easier to get through a budget meeting because you keep on saying, last time this thing made $1 billion. Well, last time was in the 1800s, but okay, fine, whatever. You pulled it off. You're not alone in it, but in my book, you did it best because I like to see somebody make something out of that particular character and in that particular mythology, and you did that. So thank you.
I mean, thank you for enjoying it. I mean, we do have a hint at Princess Narda in it, and in the follow-up that I had worked on, we were going to explore where the original Mandrake was, but again, I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It
seems unlikely, but let's, a good story is a good story. You always got to root for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm not sure how the licensing is today. I don't know if you know, but it seems like if anybody was going to be doing it, it would be a Mad Cave these days.
Possibly, yes. Yeah, and they also have.
Well, they have Defenders.
They have Defenders. They have isn't Dan DiDeo writing Defenders?
We don't need to talk about it.
I'm sorry.
Dan,
yes, he did write the Defenders miniseries, and but Phantom's coming too. So
yes, and they have they also, not related specifically, but they also have the Dick Tracy as well.
They have Dick Tracy and Speed
They
Racer.
did a nice job with Dick Tracy, actually, and it kind of reminds me now of what you did with Mandrake. But they did that process. What makes this work? What do we need to make it to get it across the plate today?
I mean,
Even if you're setting it back in time, it's still 2025, I think.
Yeah.
But
And maybe,
Not sure about the
these days.
80 or what, but
it's interesting because we've been talking about this for a while. And we talk about the way comics work, and there's this very interesting concept that these characters that we have been talking about for a lot of this conversation are things that other people created some time ago, many years ago, a few years ago, whatever they were, and being able to work within that. It's for you've created your own characters though as well that have been wonderful. How different is that for you working in something where somebody else has already set up the guardrails and ground rules versus something that you get the ability to go from scratch?
It's there's 6 of 1, honestly. There's the pros and the
Okay.
cons. The
And that's
pros,
kind of where I was hoping you would go with it, because I think there's definitely pros for both sides.
yeah, I mean, the pros when it comes to taking characters that have already been created and dealing with a shared universe like a Marvel universe, is that you don't have to worry about world building for the most part. You don't have to worry about, you have a baseline of who this character is.
right.
And you have a baseline of where they live within this universe. When I was teaching, I would say the 4 things that you have to know about every important character is their name, where they're from, what they're proud of, and what they're afraid of. And that's the minimum that you have to know about any character that is going to influence the plot in some way. Like, you don't need to know about the barista unless the barista's, going to be important to the plot.
Well, to tell you the truth, these days I would also like to know who that character voted for last November. But
Well,
that's
well, I think what they're proud of, depending on if they're proud of or afraid of,
right.
that
Good point.
that would
Yes, good point.
that
Very
could
good.
explain who they voted for. But I think that with so dealing with Laura or dealing with Elektra or Moon Knight, those are characters that exist in the world. So there's still heavy lifting on the character side, but on the world building side, the heavy lifting isn't as much there. When you're doing something of your own creation, there's the freedom that nobody can tell you that that's how a character speaks, that nobody can tell you that's how this looks, or that's how this world interacts. But you got to start from scratch.
Sure.
And and one of the jokes that I made when somebody asked about, like, why was the first book that I wrote M3, and I said, well, I set it in the real world so I wouldn't have to do any world building. Gravity is the same here, physics works here, but then you get into something like Forgotten Home, which I worked on Forgotten Home about 2 years before we went and pitched it, and it went through Comixology and then Dark Horse. I had worked on it for about 2 years, building the mythology of the world, of how the magic worked, the relationship between the Jananas and the Chilambas, like that whole thing. I wanted to really make it feel real, and then to juxtapose it with what Earth is, to show that the politics and the machinations of people is the same, but it's just in this different paradigm. That was tough, because that was building this whole world.
And I love that book. You did a wonderful job with it.
Thank you. I got my
I know. I saw that.
my tattoo of my royal Janadan symbol. Yes, which was designed by one of my very close friends from college, Kevin Maher, who's a fantastic cartoonist and graphic designer, and he's done like basically for 90% of my indie books, he's done some, whether it's the logo design or some type of graphic elements for it. And and he was one of the people that sort of pulled me back into comics in college in general, because he was a huge fan of comics, and he had a car so he could go to the comic shop. I didn't have a car in college, so he could drive me to the comic shop. But yeah, I although when you think about a character like Halaziz, so lived in the Marvel universe. J.M.D. Mateus and John Romita Jr. created her back for Clone Conspiracy. However, her entire being was literally just Ben Reilly's girlfriend. So we did have to do some heavy lifting. Even though we were in the Marvel universe, we had to do some heavy lifting in terms of her power set, in terms of, is it her who's magical, or is the masks that are magical? What's her personality like? What is it that's driving her? And we know that Ben is obviously a trigger and somebody who is who she focuses on. But this has had to be a story that focused on her. So we would have a comment here or there in a dialogue balloon referencing Ben, but Ben wasn't coming into this. So we had to find a way to make it to make her be believable, to give her own agency outside of Ben, which prior to that had never been done. She was always, in relationship to Ben. So.
That's awesome. I mean, it's it comes down to the things we talk about all the time in how people go about, one of the comments earlier that Bill made about seeing the sausage, how it gets made, and just how one of the things we love to do on this show is talk about how people come up with these things and do all of these amazing magical things behind the scene. And in the end of the day, we're left with a comic book that's, turn the pages and here it is. And it's a great story and all the pieces fit together in this magical way. But it's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of, effort, and everybody who does it should be celebrated for doing it.
Here's the part you should never, ever think about.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So if you've never thought about this, I've just ruined your day. It takes a half dozen people at least, months of effort to produce a comic book, good, bad, or indifferent. And some think good, others will think bad. It takes 15 minutes to read it. One person reads it, 15 minutes later, 5 months worth of work by 5 people, gone.
Okay, you ruined my day. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I did.
Think about a movie. You spend months and months and months, maybe even years, making a movie, and in 2 hours it's done. Or think about when they're always destroying buildings in Las Vegas. It takes 6 months to a year to make a building, 10 seconds to drop it to the ground.
That's right. Yep. That's right. And one of my favorite, I was going to say comedians, but that's not true. One of my favorite, what Mel Brooks referred to as stand-up philosophers.
Yes.
Is George Carlin.
NVTS nuts.
And I still use the present tense because his stuff is just as effective today as it was ever. However, George would spend a year putting together that hour act. And he would spend months in rehearsal working on each word, the delivery of the word. I know it sounds so spontaneous, and that's the job. It's supposed to sound spontaneous. But, it's not an ad-lib situation. It isn't improv. He worked hard for that.
Yeah.
And that's true for most media, except for those really wonderful moments in our lives when everything just falls together all at once. It doesn't happen often enough.
And that's why I carry a notebook always and I write everything down. always.
Yeah.
Because even if there is one of those magical moments, I want to write it down because I can find some way to try and mine that for a book somehow, some way.
I think that's why they
I
invented.
wanted one of Dr. Doom's little robots that videos everything that follows you around.
Or like Herbie or something, yeah.
That's right, but I think we pretty much got that now. And I'm not happy about it.
I think that's why they invented, shower crayons as well.
Is that why?
So
Damn,
I need shower crayons. I need
I've been
those.
getting wet for no reason. Erica, you promised us an hour and we just exploited the hell out of that.
Thank you so much.
It is fine. I got a good 4.5 inches of weaving done.
That looks awesome.
There you go.
Glad we could give you something to pass the time.
And another convention soon or wherever.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I am hopeful for the Fantastic Four, as you are. I am cautiously hopeful. But no, thank you for having me, Bob, Mike. Very appreciative to be able to chat and to talk about craft and such. But I hope you're both well. I hope you're both staying happy and healthy with the family. And have a lovely evening.
Same to you.
Erica, all that back to you. Really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Hi, Bob.
This was so much fun. What a great night.
Yeah. That's true.
We were going to get to some stuff. We're going to have to hold on to it. I don't, because most of the stuff we're going to get to is not fun.
It's also stuff that's going to change in the next week. Now that's not a good reason.
We're not
doing something, right? But it changed all yesterday. It'll change again. Who knows? Constantly. It's not good. So tune in next week to find out what type of drag we're talking about.
I'm not 100% sure if we're going to have a show next week. It's likely we won't, just because I'm down here and trying to work that out. I will let everybody know by the next day or so. If not, we will see you on President's Day. On that Monday, we will be having a show with Ed Brisson. And just before the show started, we got confirmation for the following week that we're going to have Adriana Mello on the show. So we'll be in touch.
Wait a moment. I got to ask a question.
Go ahead.
On President's Day, on the President's Day SquadCast, will we be having the president?
No, we're going to have a Canadian on.
Awesome. I'm there.
No, we're talking We're going to talk to a Canadian and see how much it costs, for things over there, and how much he wants to charge us for things. So,
we'll see.
But he's a vegan, so he doesn't really care about the cows and stuff.
Thanks, folks, for being here. We always appreciate it. And I hope you feel a closer part of the community that we promote on this SquadCast. It's a wonderful place to be.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We will be back in 2 weeks, if not next week. But, stay tuned to all of our socials on Pop Culture Squad on pretty much every social media. We'll let you know. But we will be back. And thank you so much for being here. Everybody have a great night.
Take it easy.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?